Welcome to PRAJNA SPARKS special series 59 Days of Healing, where we explore one maxim from the Tibetan Lojong text, 7 points for healing dualistic mind each day to integrate the practice into our lives. Today is day 55. We are working with point 7, tips. Maxim 55 reads, free yourself by both investigating and examining. What the heck is that supposed to mean? How in the world does investigating and examining free anything? And what is it that we're supposed to be investigating and examining? Well, we're healing dualistic minds, so that's what we're investigating and examining. We're looking at the entrenched habits, binary thought patterns, and the emotions that disturb mind's tranquility, the natural state of mind. Why are we doing that? Because any of the Buddha's teachings, any of the instructions about impermanence, suffering, non-self, whatever it may be, applies to anything. If we see how it applies to one thing, then we see how it applies to anything. And what's the handiest thing? Our own mind. It's always there with us. So the more we examine and investigate our own mind, the more we actually plumb the depths of knowledge that we're able to gain from our immediate sensory experience. Beyond that, our reasoning capacity. Beyond that, subtle reasoning capacity. And beyond that, transcending even reasoning to that non-dual way of knowing, intimate reflexive awareness. What is it that we should be examining and investigating within mind to free ourselves? Here's a quick statement of our predicament. Ignorance of who we are generates emotional disturbance of mind's natural tranquility. That drives us to act in ways that are contrary to our true nature. This leads to consequences that we experience as the myriad kinds of suffering. That's what we examine and investigate right within our own mind. Yes, this very dualistic mind is going to examine and investigate its own experience. And by examining and investigating dualistic mind transcends itself. How gorgeous is that? Now, what does it mean to examine and investigate? Aren't they pretty much the same thing? This is one of the areas where it makes a big difference if we have an understanding of the source languages of Buddhist heritage. English is a wonderful language. I'm crazy about it. But it is almost too prolific. Just look at those words. How would you distinguish between examining and investigating? Sure, you can rely on a teacher, and that's a good thing to do to start. But it's also good to really look at the source languages from which Buddhist heritage explains these practices and mind itself. If we look at the Sanskrit, examination, vitaka, is a much coarser kind of analysis. It's an overview, a survey, basically identifying what is this. So there's a kind of knowing that happens because we're identifying it. We survey and we identify. So for example, perhaps we are at the soccer field and we are looking for our child. So we survey the whole field and we scan all of the people and all of the kids who are playing soccer. They're all in uniform, so we have to pay a little bit more attention than usual. At some point we go, there they are. We've identified our child. That's what examination is about. A very broad, open surveying that's very general, that allows for identification, but it's still rather coarse or rough. The Sanskrit vichara is investigating. It's a finer version of examining. Once examining has identified something, then we can use the mind's capacity to know to engage in a more detailed kind of analysis. There's almost a back and forth that's happening between mind and whatever it's analyzing, which in this case is mind itself. So there's a much more subtle flow, an exchange of information almost between mind and mind. So different qualities of mind are operating here. Why is it important to go to such tedious detail? Not just because I like tedious detail, which I do, but because it's a very specific kind of practice. On one level, we can use it in our everyday life, just looking at the ways that our habits click in, identifying, spotting our triggers for habits that we want to work with is what allows us to then investigate more subtly. Well, when do those triggers tend to happen? Do they always trigger a particular habit or only if there's other things going on and so forth? That helps us to create atmospheres for working with our practice in everyday life. Even more importantly, this maxim relates to the formal meditation practices in point 2. Investigating and examining are the core tools we use when we are working with the various kinds of meditative inquiry with point 2. Examining the essence of awareness beyond rising in maxim 3, the examining is quite broad, an open kind of surveying. We're trying to identify, pinpoint that essence of awareness, where it arises, where it ceases, where it remains in between. Then we might investigate more specifically, and then we might rest in the instructions of those formal meditation practices. So the relevance of this maxim is actually quite profound. This maxim is explained in many different ways, but these particular qualities of examining and investigating are mental states that are used in the insight practices of Vipassana. Particularly, Mahamudra Vipassana uses these two factors as like the scalpels that pinpoint and dig into those areas of mind that will unfold and open the true nature of things right within mind, the true nature of everything that is.
Well, you are sort of queen of the tedious details, so I appreciate that this is something that would draw you. It makes me wonder these two aspects, the investigating and examining. I was thinking about how they seem a little to me like qualitative and quantitative research, where quantitative research is more like this examination where you're surveying and you're seeing things in this broad course way, where qualitative research helps you to really dig into like what are the meanings behind the different data points, and where it is more of a conversation. So that may not map on exactly to this, but one of the things I know about qualitative and quantitative research is that some people are really drawn more toward one or the other, either because of the way they think about knowledge and creation of knowledge, or because of the kind of skill set that they bring to being a researcher. And then some people do mixed methods where you do both, which this is really a mixed method approach. But I'm wondering what do you do if some people are more drawn toward one or the other of these, and do you lean into that? Do you try to compensate for that? Is that even a thing?
Both examining and investigating. That both is important. Investigating without examining, what are you doing? Yeah, you're going deep into some very specific detail, but did you identify something relevant in the examining piece first, or are you off on a wild goose chase? Examining without investigating, survey, 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 identify, 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 calculate, 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 lots of lists, no profundity. So free yourself by both investigating and examining is a very important element of this maxim. We need that broad survey to pinpoint something that's apt for investigation. And then we dive deep into the investigation. They go hand in hand.
I loved your description of dualistic mind freeing itself from dualism. And it immediately made me think of Audre Lorde's quote, "The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house," where she's talking about racism and heterosexism. You can't combat that. You can't take that apart using the tools. And she's talking, I think, about sort of social science tools, just what I was discussing. Qualitative and quantitative research aren't going to take apart the thing that created them, the methods that we have. So I thought it was really interesting and encouraging that dualistic mind can actually free itself from dualism. And so just thinking about sort of maybe that's a little different from dismantling societal structures.
All of these examples have to be different. They can't map perfectly. If they mapped perfectly, they'd be the same thing. They wouldn't be an example of something else. These are wonderful examples. The interesting thing with dualistic mind is that it can't dismantle itself. Very similar to the Audre Lorde quote. The tools of dualistic mind will not dismantle dualistic mind. What they will do is create an opening where those natural qualities created by nothing, uncreated, unconditioned, pristine, timeless awareness, non-dual wisdom of gnosis, burst forward in the opening that the tools of dualistic mind did create. So the dualistic tools of discursive thought, examining, investigation, and so forth, we use in listening to refine our understanding of the words of the teachings, developing a semantic understanding. Then we refine them even more with those same dualistic tools in contemplation, taking that semantic understanding, using our sandpaper and all of the tools we have in dualistic mind, debating, writing, journaling, making songs, discussing, asking questions, and we develop intellectual understanding. Still tools of dualistic mind. If we stop there, we haven't gotten the point. We have all these great tools and we even have all these wonderful creations from these great tools. But if we sit there with our wonderful results of debating and our journals full of notes, we're stuck. That's not all there is. We go to the formal practice of meditation and meditative inquiry, where we're alternating between the examining and investigating that gives rise to clear knowing. This is prajna, precise knowing that is also dualistic, a knowing by one thing of another thing. In that meditation, when that arises, little by little, we habituate ourselves to that knowledge, and it starts to become finer and finer. What's first a glimpse, or what in Tibetan is called the fleeting experience, becomes more stable, stronger, and more powerful until it gets us right to the synapse, the gap between dualistic thought and non-dual wisdom. Dualistic mind and all its tools gets us right there. The opening happens. The fire of prajna burns all of dualistic mind, its tools, its toys, its songs. The synapse gets breached, and all that's left is Yeshe, gnosis, non-dual wisdom, the true nature of mind, just as it is, just as we are. This is omniscience. This is Buddhahood.
And from Audre Lorde, I urge each one of us here to reach down into that deep place of knowledge inside herself.
As the Buddha puts it, in this way, one finally arrives at truth.
This has been Yeshe and Tanya on day 55 of PRAJNA SPARKS Special Series, 59 Days of Healing. Tune in daily for more maxims from the Tibetan Lojong text, 7 Points for Healing Dualistic Mind. Check the episode notes for more resources, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at PRAJNA SPARKS, and email us, sparks@prajnafire.com, with any questions. May all beings benefit.